The planet was eerily silent, save for the distant hum of alien ships hovering just above the horizon. A single human base sat in the middle of the barren wasteland, its metal walls barely visible under the looming shadows of towering alien warships. The sky above was a deep crimson, casting an unnatural glow over the battlefield. A few scattered soldiers stood guard, their eyes scanning the horizon, waiting for the inevitable. Captain Benner stood near the edge of the base, his eyes locked onto the enemy fleet. Sweat dripped down his face, but he didn't flinch. His fingers gripped the edge of his rifle tightly as he looked over the ragtag group of soldiers who had gathered for this final stand. His heart beat steadily, though his mind raced with the gravity of their situation. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and alone. No reinforcements, no retreat. He turned to face his men, his voice calm but carrying the weight of a leader who knew this could be their last day alive. No reinforcements, no retreat. We stand our ground. This is our planet, and we will defend it with everything we have. His words were met with grim silence, but each soldier stood a little straighter, their resolve firming as they prepared for what was to come. The alien fleet above them was unlike anything they had ever encountered. The ships were massive, dark, and sleek, moving with an eerie quietness that made their presence even more menacing. Each ship was cloaked, invisible to the human sensors, and the eye-controlled drones inside those ships would soon rain down on the base. They had no idea how many soldiers the aliens had sent, but judging by the size of the fleet, it would be more than enough to wipe out their small human force. The countdown had already begun. Every second that ticked by was a reminder of how little time they had left. With a deep breath, Benner activated his comms. "Prepare yourselves," he said. "This isn't going to be easy, but if we go down fighting." His voice was steady, but beneath it, there was an undeniable tension. He knew the odds. They were not in their favor. The alien forces were armed with cloaking technology that allowed them to disappear in plain sight, and their AI drones were faster, stronger, and more advanced than anything humanity had ever built. The human soldiers were outmatched in every way, but they were not going to give up, not while there was still breath in their bodies. As Benner watched the skies, the tension in the air thickened. The alien ships began to release their forces. Thousands of AI drones dropped from the belly of each vessel, their dark forms disappearing into the planet's surface like an unstoppable wave. It was the beginning of the end. The attack had begun. No backup. Benner muttered to himself, feeling the weight of those words settle over him like a heavy shroud. They had no choice now but to fight with everything they had. The captain turned to his soldiers, each of them standing at the ready, their faces a mixture of fear and determination. They all knew that this was likely a suicide mission, but they also knew they couldn't just lay down and die. They would fight. They had to. "Take your positions," Benner ordered, his voice carrying over the sound of the increasing wind. The soldiers moved quickly, spreading out across the base's perimeter, taking cover behind the few rocks and structures that remained standing. The base was small, surrounded by a vast, rocky terrain that left little in the way of cover. They would have to use their surroundings to their advantage. It was the only chance they had. The aliens' cloaking devices made it nearly impossible to detect their movements, but the humans were used to fighting in the shadows. They knew how to work with limited resources and, if necessary, use the land itself as a weapon. Benner knew that the planet's harsh terrain, barren, rocky, and full of unpredictable dust storms, would be their best defense. The aliens' advanced technology would be useless if they couldn't track the humans in the fog of war. Benner's mind raced as he watched the first wave of drones begin to appear on the surface. They materialized from the shimmering air like ghosts, their metal bodies reflecting the red light of the sky. The soldiers had no choice now but to fight. There would be no escape. There was no retreat. They would either win or die trying. The captain's heart hammered in his chest as he called out, his voice steady despite the growing sense of dread. "Engage the enemy. We fight until the end." His words were a rallying cry. Every soldier knew the consequences of failure, but they also knew what it meant to stand their ground. With a sudden rush, the first wave of drones closed in. Their movements were sharp and efficient, their artificial intelligence allowing them to anticipate human movements. The humans, however, were not so easily defeated. Benner's men were fighters. They were survivors. They had fought in countless battles, but nothing like this. Nothing like the storm that was coming. The battle began in full force as the human soldiers opened fire, their energy weapons lighting up the darkened landscape. The drones responded quickly, their shields blocking incoming fire with eerie precision. The humans had no chance of defeating them head-on, but their quick thinking and guerrilla tactics kept them alive. They fought with desperation, hiding in rocky crevices, firing from behind cover, and luring the drones into traps. Benner moved quickly, directing his soldiers, using his experience to predict the aliens' movements. His eyes darted around, analyzing the battlefield, calculating their next move. The noise of weapons fire filled the air, and explosions rocked the ground as drones were shot down in spectacular bursts of light. But for every one that fell, two more took its place. The odds were overwhelming, but Benner refused to let fear take hold. He would fight. They all would. As the drones closed in, the human forces took their final stand, using every scrap of tech and ingenuity they had left. There would be no retreat, no reinforcements. It was just them and the alien forces. But Benner knew one thing. Humans might be the underdogs in this fight, but they would never back down. They would fight, and they would give everything they had. The first wave of alien forces struck like a tidal wave, crashing into the human defenses with brutal efficiency. Robotic soldiers, their sleek metal bodies reflecting the red light of the dying sun, marched forward in perfect synchrony. They were joined by cloaked vehicles, nearly invisible to the human eye, their low hums the only sign of their presence. The alien fleet had landed, and now they were bringing their full force to bear on the small human base. There was no turning back. Captain Benner stood at the front lines, his heart pounding as the first wave of attackers stormed in. His men had been preparing for this moment, but no amount of training could fully prepare them for the sheer intensity of the assault. The alien forces were relentless, and they had numbers on their side. The humans, though, had something the aliens did not: resourcefulness. "Stay sharp, everyone," Benner barked into his comms. "They're not going to give up easily. We can't afford to hesitate." The human soldiers were outgunned, but they didn't flinch. Their weapons were crude by comparison to the alien technology, but they were effective when used with cunning. They opened fire, but the alien drone shields absorbed most of the blasts. The humans quickly adapted, switching tactics and using everything they had at their disposal. Makeshift explosives, scraps of old tech, and even the terrain itself were turned into weapons. The sound of gunfire echoed through the barren landscape as humans and aliens collided in a deadly dance. The humans were scattered across the rocky wasteland, using the environment to their advantage. They hid behind jagged rock formations, setting traps and luring the drones into narrow passes where they could strike without being overwhelmed. Every shot counted. Every move could mean the difference between life and death. In the darkness of the trenches, the scene turned chaotic. Explosions rocked the ground, sending plumes of dust and debris into the air. The air was thick with smoke, making it hard to see more than a few feet ahead. Alien drones moved like shadows, their cloaked forms nearly impossible to track. But the humans were relentless. They fought with the determination of soldiers who had nowhere else to go but forward. Benner led his team through the madness, his mind racing as he directed his soldiers in their guerrilla tactics. He had been in countless battles before, but nothing like this. The odds were overwhelming, yet they refused to give up. He had watched his men fight, each one of them determined to survive, to hold their ground against impossible odds. Then, amidst the chaos, the worst happened. Lieutenant Jonas, one of Benner's most trusted soldiers, was caught in the open during a fierce firefight. An alien drone fired a deadly energy blast, striking Jonas in the side. The lieutenant fell to the ground with a cry of pain, blood staining the dirt beneath him. Benner's heart skipped a beat as he saw his friend go down. "Jonas!" Benner shouted, rushing to his side. Jonas was bleeding heavily, his face pale, but he was still conscious. His eyes met Benner's with a pained but determined look. "Captain, I'm fine. Just need a minute. Keep fighting. We can't stop now." But Benner knew better. He could see the severity of the wound. Jonas would not survive much longer if they didn't get him medical help soon. Benner's mind raced. He had two choices: pull Jonas back to the base, where there might be a chance to save him, or keep pushing forward and risk losing the rest of his men. The decision was agonizing. He couldn't leave Jonas behind, but he also couldn't abandon the fight. The aliens were closing in, and they were relentless. If they stopped now, the entire base would be overrun. There was no time for hesitation. "Benner, I can still fight," Jonas gasped, gripping his captain's arm with what little strength he had left. "I won't let you down. Let me go back. We fight together." The words cut through Benner like a knife. The loyalty, the bravery in Jonas's voice was undeniable. It was what made humans so dangerous. No matter how overwhelming the odds, they never gave up. Benner had always known that his soldiers would fight to the end, but hearing it from Jonas, in that moment, was different. It was a reminder of why they were here, why they refused to back down. With a heavy heart, Benner made the decision. He wasn't leaving his men behind. "Stay down, Jonas. I'll get you to safety. You're not dying today." He helped Jonas into cover, his mind spinning as he weighed the risk of retreating. But the fight had to go on. The rest of the team needed him. Jonas clenched his teeth, refusing to let go of his weapon. "I'll be fine, Captain. You know me. I'll fight." Benner nodded, though a knot tightened in his stomach. He knew Jonas wouldn't stop. He knew that, even in pain, he would fight until he couldn't anymore. The thought of leaving him behind filled him with dread, but he had no choice. He turned to face the battle once again, his mind focused on the task at hand. The tension in the air was palpable. The sound of weapons fire, explosions, and screams filled the air as the humans fought for survival. The alien drones kept coming, undeterred by the human resistance. But the soldiers of humanity were far from broken. They fought back with every ounce of strength they had, refusing to bow down to the overwhelming force of the alien invasion. Benner's gaze hardened as he surveyed the battlefield. His men were not giving an inch. The human spirit was alive and burning, and despite the odds, they were pushing forward. The enemy might have advanced technology, but humanity had something that could never be taken away: determination, loyalty, and the will to survive. The battle raged on, and Benner knew one thing for certain: no matter what happened, they would fight to the very end. And in that moment, as the first wave of aliens began to falter, a flicker of hope burned in his heart. The impossible fight might just be winnable after all. The human base trembled under the shockwaves of an alien orbital bombardment. Explosions ripped through the air, lighting up the dark sky with blinding flashes of fire. The ground shook violently, sending soldiers stumbling as they tried to keep their footing. A cloud of dust and smoke billowed up into the atmosphere, making it nearly impossible to see more than a few feet in any direction. The alien forces had just unleashed their most devastating weapon, and the result was catastrophic. Captain Benner stood frozen for a moment, watching as the bombardment obliterated parts of their base. In the blink of an eye, entire structures were turned to rubble. The ground was scorched, and fires erupted, casting eerie shadows in the chaos. The hum of alien weapons filled the air, cutting through the sound of explosions like a razor. It was clear: the humans were no longer in control. Benner's eyes narrowed as he took in the destruction. His first instinct was to fight back, but he knew that in this moment, the fight was no longer about holding the base. It was about survival. The aliens had brought their full wrath down upon them. And now, the humans had to retreat, regroup, and find a way to strike back. Get to the underground bunkers. Move, now. Benner shouted into his comms, his voice steady despite the panic around him. The soldiers, battered but determined, scrambled for cover, their boots pounding against the cracked earth as they made their way to the only safe place they had left. The underground bunkers. It was their last refuge. As the humans retreated, the alien forces showed no signs of slowing down. Their warships hovered above, cloaked in the sky, raining down devastating energy blasts. The first wave of drones had already landed, but now the aliens unleashed their most powerful creations, giant, towering war machines with advanced AI combat systems. These drones were unlike anything the humans had ever encountered. Their energy shields made them nearly invulnerable to human fire, and their weapons systems could vaporize anything in their path. The humans' weapons were primitive by comparison. Their firearms were almost useless against the towering drones, and the explosives they had left barely scratched the surface of the alien shields. Despite this, the humans fought with a ferocity that was unmatched. Benner knew they couldn't win this fight with firepower alone. They had to use strategy, skill, and most importantly, their determination. Hold your ground. Benner barked, his voice filled with urgency. We're not done yet. Keep firing. But even as he spoke, the reality of their situation set in. The humans were outnumbered and outgunned. The alien drones tore through their defenses like a hot knife through butter. The humans' last remaining weapons were barely holding off the onslaught, and the alien forces kept coming, relentless and unyielding. In the midst of the chaos, Benner spotted Private Mendez, a young rookie soldier who had joined the unit only a few weeks ago. Mendez was fighting hard, his rifle shaking in his hands as he aimed at one of the approaching drones. Benner had seen the rookie's determination from the start, and he admired his courage. But in this moment, Mendez was overmatched. The rookie fired off a few shots, but before he could reload, a blast from one of the alien drones struck him head-on. The explosion was deafening. Benner's heart stopped as he watched Mendez's body go limp, his rifle falling to the ground with a clatter. The soldier was gone, just like that. It was a brutal reminder of how quickly life could be snuffed out in a battle like this. Benner's stomach churned with anger and grief as he watched his team lose one of their own. But there was no time to mourn. Mendez, Benner shouted, but it was too late. He could see the life draining from the young soldier's body, and his heart sank. The rookie had barely been given a chance to prove himself, but now he was gone, a casualty of war. His death weighed heavily on Benner's heart. He had seen soldiers die before, but Mendez had been different, young, eager, with so much potential. Benner felt a deep sense of responsibility for the loss. He had failed to protect Mendez, and now his team would have to carry the weight of that loss. The emotional toll of the battle was starting to show, and Benner knew that his soldiers were beginning to feel it. They were all fighting for their lives, but they were also fighting for the memory of those who had already fallen. He quickly gathered his team, rallying them together in the chaos. "Listen to me," he yelled, his voice steady despite the grief he felt. "Mendez didn't die in vain. His sacrifice means something. We will get through this together." The words felt hollow, but they were all he had. The soldiers looked at him, their faces grim but resolute. Benner could see the pain in their eyes, but he could also see something else. Resolve. They would not let Mendez's death be for nothing. They would fight on, no matter the odds. "Captain, we can't hold much longer," one of the soldiers said, his voice strained. "They're pushing us back." Benner's gaze hardened. He could hear the urgency in the soldier's voice, and he knew that the time for retreat was fast approaching. But there was no giving up, not while they still had a chance to fight back. "Fall back to secondary positions," Benner ordered. "We'll hold them there as long as we can. Don't let them take us without a fight." The retreat was messy, but the soldiers followed their orders without hesitation. They ran toward the secondary positions, their weapons raised and ready. Benner stayed at the rear, covering the retreat as best as he could. He had to make sure his team made it out of this alive. But as he moved, the weight of Mendez's death and the battle's grim reality pressed heavily on his shoulders. He couldn't let his team see him falter, not now. He had to stay strong for them, even if it meant carrying the burden of their losses alone. The alien forces, however, were not going to give them any reprieve. As the humans retreated, the drones kept coming, their energy shields flashing with deadly intent. The humans' firepower was barely enough to slow them down. But despite everything, the humans fought back with everything they had, determined to make the aliens pay for every inch of ground they took. Benner glanced back at his team. They were still alive, still fighting, and that was enough. For now, they had come this far, and they weren't about to stop. The battle was far from over, and neither was humanity's fight for survival. The situation was dire. The last shred of hope lay in a desperate plan, one that could either save humanity or wipe them out completely. Captain Benner stood over the remnants of his team, his mind racing with the only option left: a suicide mission to infiltrate the alien command center. It was their last chance to strike a blow that could turn the tide of the war, but it would come at a heavy price. The underground bunker, once a safe haven, now felt like a tomb. The soldiers were exhausted, their bodies bruised and broken from the relentless onslaught. Yet, despite the exhaustion, there was a fire in their eyes. They had been pushed to the brink, but they had not given up. Not yet. "We have one shot at this," Benner said, his voice firm, as he addressed the remaining soldiers. "We infiltrate the alien command center, destroy their AI core, and cripple their forces. If we don't, humanity is done for. No second chances." His words were met with silence, but the soldiers didn't need to hear more. They knew what was at stake. They had already lost so much: friends, comrades, and their base, but they were still standing, still breathing. They were the last line of defense, and if they didn't take this gamble, there would be no future left. Benner's plan was simple, yet incredibly risky. The alien forces had cloaking technology, making their ships and drones invisible to the naked eye. The humans had managed to capture one of the cloaking devices during an earlier raid. It was their only hope for sneaking past the alien sentries unnoticed. If they could get to the command center undetected, they could plant explosive charges around the AI core and destroy it, crippling the alien forces. But the journey was perilous. The alien camps were heavily guarded, their soldiers more advanced and ruthless than anything the humans had ever faced. Benner knew that the mission could end in disaster, but it was a chance they had to take. As the humans prepared to move out, Benner took one last look at his team. Their faces were weary, but there was a shared understanding between them. They had come this far, and now they had to finish what they started. "Stay sharp," Benner ordered, his voice low and steady. "We don't have much time. Move out." The soldiers, cloaked in their stolen alien technology, moved silently through the shadowed landscape. The stealth technology worked better than they had hoped. They were invisible to the alien sensors, able to slip through the enemy lines unnoticed. The hum of alien machinery echoed in the distance as the team advanced, their hearts pounding in their chests. The terrain was rough, jagged rock formations and deep ravines providing natural cover. The humans used their knowledge of the environment to their advantage, staying hidden as they neared the alien base. Every step felt like it could be their last, and yet they pressed on, driven by the need to complete their mission. The journey took hours, but eventually they arrived at the outskirts of the alien command center. The structure loomed ahead, a massive facility surrounded by guards, drones, and energy barriers. It was heavily fortified, the heart of the alien invasion. Benner signaled for the team to halt. They were close now, but the hardest part was yet to come. The final stretch was exposed, with little cover between them and the center. But there was no turning back. This was their chance, their only chance. "Get ready," Benner whispered, his voice barely audible over the sound of their breathing. "We make our move on my command." The team nodded in unison, checking their weapons one last time. The cloaking devices made them nearly invisible, but there was no way to be certain that the aliens hadn't detected them. Still, they couldn't afford to wait any longer. It was now or never. Benner led the charge, moving swiftly toward the entrance of the command center. The soldiers followed closely, staying in tight formation, each one keeping a watchful eye for any signs of movement. The sound of their boots on the ground was muffled by the technology, but the tension in the air was palpable. As they neared the core of the alien facility, disaster struck. A sudden, loud hum echoed from the alien command center. The cloaking devices flickered, their power source destabilized by some unknown interference. The soldiers were instantly exposed. Alien drones and sentries swarmed around them, their weapons raised and ready to fire. "Damn it," Benner cursed under his breath, as the humans scrambled to take cover. Their weapons malfunctioned under the pressure, and they found themselves at the mercy of the enemy's superior technology. It seemed like all was lost. The alien forces were too powerful, and the humans had no way of fighting back. But Captain Benner wasn't ready to give up. Not yet. Not after everything they had been through. "Form up. We charge now," Benner ordered, his voice filled with a defiance that resonated through the team. The soldiers, battered and bruised, hesitated for a split second, but then they rallied behind their captain. They had fought this hard to survive, and they weren't about to back down now. The underground bunker, once a safe haven, now felt like a tomb. The soldiers were exhausted, their bodies bruised and broken from the relentless onslaught. Yet, despite the exhaustion, there was a fire in their eyes. They had been pushed to the brink, but they had not given up. Not yet. "We have one shot at this," Benner said, his voice firm, as he addressed the remaining soldiers. "We infiltrate the alien command center, destroy their AI core, and cripple their forces. If we don't, humanity is done for. No second chances." His words were met with silence, but the soldiers didn't need to hear more. They knew what was at stake. They had already lost so much. Friends, comrades, and their base, but they were still standing, still breathing. They were the last line of defense, and if they didn't take this gamble, there would be no future left. Benner's plan was simple, yet incredibly risky. The alien forces had cloaking technology, making their ships and drones invisible to the naked eye. The humans had managed to capture one of the cloaking devices during an earlier raid. It was their only hope for sneaking past the alien sentries unnoticed. If they could get to the command center undetected, they could plant explosive charges around the AI core and destroy it, crippling the alien forces. But the journey was perilous. The alien camps were heavily guarded, their soldiers more advanced and ruthless than anything the humans had ever faced. Benner knew that the mission could end in disaster, but it was a chance they had to take. As the humans prepared to move out, Benner took one last look at his team. Their faces were weary, but there was a shared understanding between them. They had come this far, and now they had to finish what they started. "Stay sharp," Benner ordered, his voice low and steady. "We don't have much time. Move out." The soldiers, cloaked in their stolen alien technology, moved silently through the shadowed landscape. The stealth technology worked better than they had hoped. They were invisible to the alien sensors, able to slip through the enemy lines unnoticed. The hum of alien machinery echoed in the distance as the team advanced, their hearts pounding in their chests. The terrain was rough, jagged rock formations and deep ravines providing natural cover. The humans used their knowledge of the environment to their advantage, staying hidden as they neared the alien base. Every step felt like it could be their last, and yet they pressed on, driven by the need to complete their mission. The journey took hours, but eventually they arrived at the outskirts of the alien command center. The structure loomed ahead, a massive facility surrounded by guards, drones, and energy barriers. It was heavily fortified, the heart of the alien invasion. Benner signaled for the team to halt. They were close now, but the hardest part was yet to come. The final stretch was exposed, with little cover between them and the center. But there was no turning back. This was their chance, their only chance. "Get ready," Benner whispered, his voice barely audible over the sound of their breathing. "We make our move on my command." The team nodded in unison, checking their weapons one last time. The cloaking devices made them nearly invisible, but there was no way to be certain that the aliens hadn't detected them. Still, they couldn't afford to wait any longer. It was now or never. Benner led the charge, moving swiftly toward the entrance of the command center. The soldiers followed closely, staying in tight formation, each one keeping a watchful eye for any signs of movement. The sound of their boots on the ground was muffled by the technology, but the tension in the air was palpable. As they neared the core of the alien facility, disaster struck. A sudden, loud hum echoed from the alien command center. The cloaking devices flickered, their power source destabilized by some unknown interference. The soldiers were instantly exposed. Alien drones and sentries swarmed around them, their weapons raised and ready to fire. "Damn it," Benner cursed under his breath, as the humans scrambled to take cover. Their weapons malfunctioned under the pressure, and they found themselves at the mercy of the enemy's superior technology. It seemed like all was lost. The alien forces were too powerful, and the humans had no way of fighting back. But Captain Benner wasn't ready to give up. Not yet. Not after everything they had been through. "Form up. We charge now," Benner ordered, his voice filled with a defiance that resonated through the team. The soldiers, battered and bruised, hesitated for a split second, but then they rallied behind their captain. They had fought this hard to survive, and they weren't about to back down now. With a cry, they surged forward, charging headfirst into the alien forces. Guns blazing, they fought tooth and nail, determined to make their final stand. They were outgunned, outmanned, and out of options, but they had something the aliens didn't: humanity's will to survive. Benner fought alongside them, his heart pounding in his chest as he led the charge. The explosions from the alien drones and the deafening sound of gunfire filled the air. But he didn't stop. He had a mission to complete, and he would see it through to the end. With every step, they got closer to the core. The humans were making their final stand, taking down drone after drone, fighting with everything they had left. But the alien forces were closing in on them, and time was running out. Benner's eyes locked onto the AI core, a massive glowing device at the center of the command center. It was their target, the key to stopping the alien invasion. With one final push, they reached it. The charges were set. The countdown began. This was it, the last chance to change the course of the war. Benner braced himself for what was to come, knowing that this would be the moment that determined humanity's future. Either they would succeed, or they would die fighting. But one thing was certain: this was the end of the line. The final assault had begun. The tension in the air was palpable as Captain Benner and his team fought desperately, inching closer to their target, the alien AI core that controlled the entire invasion. The odds seemed insurmountable, the alien forces more powerful than anything the humans had ever encountered. Yet even as the aliens tightened their grip, humanity refused to surrender. Benner's heart raced as he gave his final command, but the plan seemed doomed. His team was barely holding their ground against the alien forces, their weapons malfunctioning and their cloaking devices failing. They were surrounded, outgunned, and outnumbered. It seemed like all hope had been lost. Just when it seemed like the aliens would crush them, something unexpected happened. It wasn't the weapons, the tactics, or the advanced technology that saved them. It was human ingenuity. Benner, in the final moments, activated the self-destruct system hidden deep within the base. The massive, pulsating energy of the explosion was like nothing the aliens had ever witnessed. The ground shook beneath their feet, and the air was thick with the force of the blast. The explosion tore through the landscape, ripping apart the alien command center, sending shockwaves across the planet. The sky was filled with blinding light as the blast echoed for miles, leaving a wake of destruction. The alien forces, caught off guard and blinded by the immense power of the explosion, were thrown into disarray. Their sensors, once capable of detecting every human movement, went dark. The AI system that had controlled their attack was momentarily disabled, throwing the alien invaders into chaos. Without their command structure, the aliens were lost. Their once coordinated attack became a haphazard retreat as they scrambled to reorganize. The humans, who had been barely holding on, saw a sudden opening. The alien forces, disoriented and confused, began to retreat. The humans, now free from the aliens' strategic advantage, rallied together for a counterattack. But as the blast settled and the dust began to clear, there was a sobering reality. Benner knew that the explosion had come at a cost, and it was a price he was willing to pay. He had stayed behind, knowing full well that his survival was no longer an option. His team had escaped, but he remained, a silent sacrifice to ensure their victory. He stood in the heart of the blast radius, watching as the alien forces retreated, and for a fleeting moment, he allowed himself to believe that they had won. But deep down, he knew that his time had come. His mission was complete, and now he had to pay the ultimate price. As he prepared to face the consequences of his actions, his mind wandered to his comrades, the soldiers who had fought with him, side by side, until the very end. He thought of Lieutenant Jonas, who had insisted on fighting despite his injuries, and Private Mendez, who had lost his life in the chaos. They had all given everything, and Benner couldn't help but feel a sense of pride for them. They had shown what humanity was capable of when pushed to the limit. The self-destruct system had been a calculated gamble, one that required him to stay behind and ensure the explosion went off without a hitch. Benner knew that if he didn't, the aliens would regroup and the human resistance would be wiped out for good. He had to stay, no matter the cost. The explosion would buy his team the time they needed to survive and regroup, but it would also seal his fate. He took one last look at the battlefield, at the retreating alien forces. The mission had succeeded, but at what cost? Humanity had gained a reprieve, but it was a victory tainted by sacrifice. Benner could hear the faint sounds of his team's escape in the distance, the hum of their cloaked vehicles fading away. They were alive. They had a chance. And that was enough. Benner's thoughts turned to his family, to the life he would never see again. He thought of his comrades, who would carry on the fight in his place. He had done his part. The future of humanity rested in their hands now. The final seconds were slipping away, and Benner closed his eyes, accepting his fate. He had no regrets. His final thought was of his soldiers, his brothers and sisters in arms. They had fought with honor, and they had proven that humanity, despite being outnumbered and outgunned, would always find a way to fight back. The explosion echoed in his mind, a deafening roar that seemed to shake the very foundations of the world. Then everything went silent. In the aftermath of the blast, humanity's survival was no longer in question. The aliens, thrown into confusion, began to retreat, their plans for domination shattered. It was the turning point. The humans, who had been pushed to the brink of extinction, had fought back with everything they had. And in the end, it had been enough. Benner's sacrifice would never be forgotten. His death had guaranteed the survival of humanity, and his legacy would live on in the hearts of the soldiers who carried on the fight. The war was far from over, but for the first time, the humans had the upper hand. As the alien forces fled, their morale shattered, the humans gathered themselves for the next phase of the battle. They had won a crucial victory, but the war was far from over. Benner's death was a painful reminder of what they had lost, but it was also a beacon of hope. The aliens had underestimated humanity, and now they knew better. Humanity's last hope had not been in advanced technology or overwhelming firepower. It had been in the unwavering determination of individuals who refused to back down, even in the face of certain death. Benner's final sacrifice had proven that, against all odds, humanity could endure. The fight was far from over, but now, humanity had a chance to win. The battle was over. Against all odds, humanity had emerged victorious. But the cost had been devastating. The alien forces, once thought unbeatable, had been forced to retreat, leaving behind a shattered command structure and a lost cause. The survivors, battered and broken, were left to pick up the pieces of their hard-won victory. Captain Benner's sacrifice had not been in vain. His selfless decision to stay behind and ensure the success of the mission had saved the lives of countless soldiers. His name was now etched in history as a hero, a symbol of humanity's unwavering resolve in the face of overwhelming adversity. His death was a stark reminder of the high price of victory, but it was also a testament to the courage and determination that had defined the human spirit throughout the war. The survivors of the mission, the soldiers who had fought alongside Benner, returned to Earth as legends. They had defied an enemy that was technologically superior, outnumbered, and seemingly invincible. But in the end, it was their resilience, their ingenuity, and their refusal to give up that had made all the difference. They had proven that humanity, despite its flaws and limitations, was a force to be reckoned with. As the human fleet made its way back to Earth, the survivors were greeted as heroes. Their journey had been long and grueling, filled with hardship and loss, but they had made it home. The scars of war were visible on their faces, but there was a sense of pride in their hearts. They had fought for their survival, for the future of their species, and they had won. The camera pans over the fleet as it approaches Earth, a sight that once seemed impossible. The alien invaders had underestimated humanity, thinking they could easily wipe them out. But now, Earth's fleet stood ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. The survivors had proven that no matter how dark the future seemed, humanity would always find a way to fight back. As the fleet touched down on Earth, the soldiers disembarked, their bodies weary but their spirits strong. They had come home, but they knew their fight was far from over. The victory they had achieved was only the beginning. The alien forces had been dealt a major blow, but the war was not yet won. The galaxy was vast, and there would be other battles to fight, other enemies to face. In the aftermath of the battle, the memorials were erected, monuments to the fallen, to those who had given their lives for humanity's survival. Among the names of the brave soldiers, Benner's name stood out. He had led them to victory, and his sacrifice would never be forgotten. His memory lived on in the hearts of his comrades, in the soldiers who had fought beside him, and in the countless lives that had been spared because of his actions. Lieutenant Jonas, one of Benner's closest friends, stood at the memorial, his face solemn. The war had cost him more than he was willing to admit. He had lost friends, soldiers who had become family. But it was Benner's loss that weighed heaviest on his heart. Benner had been the one who had kept them together, who had led them through the darkest moments of the war, and now he was gone. As Jonas stood before the memorial, he reflected on the battle, on the sacrifices that had been made. He thought of Mendez, the rookie soldier who had been cut down too soon, and of the others who had given everything for the cause. They were gone, but their memory would live on, in every corner of the galaxy, where humanity would rise to meet its challenges. Jonas took a deep breath, his eyes scanning the horizon as he thought of the future. The war was over, but the battle for survival was far from finished. The aliens had been forced to retreat, but who knew what other threats lay in wait? The universe was vast, and humanity had only just begun to prove its strength. They thought we would fall, Jonas whispered, his voice thick with emotion. They were wrong. The words hung in the air, a simple declaration of humanity's unyielding spirit. Despite everything that had happened, despite the impossible odds they had faced, humanity had not fallen. They had fought back, and they had won. And in that victory, they had shown the universe that they would never be cowed, never be defeated. They had fought for each other, for their families, for their world. And in the end, it had been enough. As Jonas turned away from the memorial, he knew that the fight wasn't over. There would be more battles, more sacrifices, but now, Humanity stood united, stronger than ever before. They had faced the darkest hour and emerged victorious. And as they looked toward the future, they knew that no enemy, no matter how powerful, would ever break their resolve. The camera pulled back, showing Earth's fleet preparing for the next phase of their fight. The survivors were ready, their bodies bruised but their spirits unbroken. They had faced the impossible, and they had triumphed. The galaxy had underestimated humanity, but it would never make that mistake again. The war may have ended, but the legacy of what had been achieved would live on. Humanity had proven that, no matter how dire the situation, they would always rise. And now, with the universe watching, they were ready to take on whatever challenges came next. The adventure was far from over.